If you've ever asked the question of how the heck do I lose weight? Which foods are good for weight loss? Can I eat carbohydrates? Can I eat oatmeal? That food is bad for weight loss. This food is not. If you've ever felt any kind of confusion about how weight loss actually works, then I want you to keep watching this video because I'm going to share with you an understanding, which is Weight Loss 101, that literally changed the game for me, where I went from struggling with my diet and constantly losing and then gaining, doing tons of fads, raw till 4, high carb, low carb, exercising for hours every single day, and then always feeling like a failure, to now being able to maintain a 40-pound loss for the last 6 years very, very easily. The crazy thing is I was still eating like pretty healthy for most of the time that I was struggling. And then I would also have some binges in there as well, like if I'm really honest, and that was a huge factor. But if you understand this concept, you're going to understand more than 99% of people, and it's going to make the questions that you ask about how to actually lose weight be the right kind of questions that are going to give you the right kind of actions that are going to lead to long-term results, which is very important. And we're going to use a whiteboard for this, or like my version of a whiteboard. So we are going to be talking about calories, okay? I want to share with you how weight loss actually works when it comes to calories. So first and foremost is we need to understand that there is something called the law of thermodynamics. And so the law of thermodynamics is that energy can neither be created or destroyed. So let's say we have like a unit of energy here. Now that this actually exists, it can't be destroyed. We can't cancel it out. We can only move it around. So energy can't be destroyed, but it can move from place to place. That's concept one. And how this relates to weight loss is that we have calories coming into our body and we have calories coming out of our body. And a calorie equals energy. So here's what that can look like. All right, so let's say you have an apple coming in, you have maybe like a little snack right here, I don't know what that is. You got a burger and you got a milkshake. Okay, so these are the calories or energy that is coming in to your body. So I'm going to put an in right here. Okay, and then we're going to have calories coming out of your body. So this is mostly made up by your basal metabolic rate. It's just your basic processes like pumping blood around, powering your brain. I just always think of the Cruise where he's like, Dad, I don't have a brain. Sometimes I feel like that. It's growing new skin cells. It's powering while you sleep. All right, so that's your BMR, and it's mostly out of your control. It's going to be mostly influenced by how much mass you have. So if you have a lot of muscle mass, if you have a lot of fat on your body, if you're a big person, you're going to have a higher BMR than someone who is tiny. This is the difference between like a big truck that needs a lot of fuel versus a tiny, tiny little moped that really doesn't, or a Vespa. Now I'm thinking of Disney movies. And then you have the thermic effect of food, which is how many calories get burnt as you're eating. I'm just going to thermic. Spelling's not my forte. Okay, thermic effect of food. And then we have our non-exercise activity, which it would be like you're fidgeting, it would be walking around, cooking dinner, vacuuming, all those kind of fun things. And then you also have your exercise in there as well. So your exercise is actually like a really, really small part of this. So we have an X number of calories coming in and we have an X number of calories going out. This is energy going in and energy going out. And so if these two things remain the same, that you, over a long period of time, this is not over day to day, but let's say over the course of a year. Over the course of the year, the calories that you eat every day, the calories that you burn every day, is an average of, there is no excess, there is no deficit, then you're going to stay at maintenance. You're not going to have any gain, you're not going to have any loss. But what happens if we change that equation? And so if you have excess fat on your body right now, then what has happened is that at some point you have had, I'm going to make these grapes, even though grapes are not a weight gain food. I mean, conceivably they could be. We're just looking at math right here. So at some point, you have had an excess in terms of energy, okay? And so what this has created, you can see right here, is now a gap, all right? So this gap here is an energy surplus. And so because energy can either be created or destroyed, what's going to happen? Because it's not getting used up, it's going to go and it's going to be stored as fat. Fat is your rainy day fund. It's your zombie apocalypse storehouse. It is there for you when you need it. If you didn't have the ability to store fat, you probably would have died by now. But it happens because you've had an excess of calories. So what happens when we want to actually change that equation is we don't need to know numbers. We don't need to know how many calories we need. We don't need to know anything. All we need to do is change this equation where now we're eating less calories than what we burn. all right? And you could do this in many different ways, right? You could do this by changing your exercise. But as you can see, it's a bit harder to do this because exercise is just such a small portion. So what we do here when we reduce the calories in, it's actually really hard to write and talk, by the way. We reduce that to the point where there is now a gap in terms of coming in and coming out. Then what happens is, because energy can neither be created or destroyed, you have some of these little energy packets, which is fat, show them flying along, because you need to still use this right here. No ifs or buts, your body has burnt this energy. It will need to burn this energy, it is burning this energy. So it has to make it up from somewhere. So it pulls it back so that it can be used, okay? Because it's pulling it from somewhere. And so this is how, over time, with a calorie deficit, you deplete your stored fat cells. So anyone that's telling you that you don't need a calorie deficit to lose weight, that there's other ways, that it's about glucose, or it's about meal timing, or it's about what you eat, just doesn't have an understanding of how physics work. This doesn't mean that a calorie of broccoli in your body is the same in terms of how it is used by your body. And so where most people make mistakes is they think that, well, the most important factor for me to understand is this number right here. So you need to figure out, well, how many calories am I burning? And then that's going to help me determine what kind of calorie deficit I need to be in. But that's actually not the case. Because just knowing what this number potentially could be, it doesn't mean that it actually changes the input. In some ways, it can actually change it in the negative. Because let's say you're counting calories. All right, let's say that you're trying to eat 1,800 calories because that's what someone has told you to do. Or you're trying to eat 1,600 calories because of overkill, okay? So you may do that for a short period of time, but then you might end up having like a colossal binge, okay? So you've got some alcohol in there, you've got like a packet of chips, this is chips, okay? Chips. You got like a loaf of bread. You wouldn't think I did an art degree. And so what happens is that even though you may know this number, it doesn't necessarily change this equation. The only thing that actually changes this equation is genuinely eating less calories than you burn, right? It's not counting it. It's just like if you spend money or if you're trying to save something. Knowing a budget and having a budget doesn't mean that you actually automatically save money. It can be helpful, but the most important thing is to look at, well, what are my biggest calorie objectives? What are my biggest spenders when it comes to calories? Because if I could systemically remove them, let's say that you make a decision where you're just going to systemically remove alcohol from your diet, okay? We're going to systemically remove chips from our diet. Rather than bread, which is pretty high in calories, we're going to add in potatoes, which are much lower in calories, but they're very filling. We're not going to do this milkshake right here anymore, and instead we're going to swap it. Let's say we swap it for a smoothie, okay? We can still keep the burger in there, that's fine, but we're going to half the calories because we swap it for some kind of lower calorie option, okay? And so what we've done here is not by counting, but just by doing some swaps, by working smarter, by having an understanding that calories matter, we've now created a deficit, which is a genuine deficit because we're able to maintain this over a longer timeline, and then we can start to deplete those stored fat cells. And maybe you're thinking that and you're thinking, well, the problem is that not all calories are created equal. Like a calorie from potatoes or a calorie from fat might be different. Maybe you're scared of carbohydrates. Well, that can also influence things. But it still works within the same system that energy can either be created or destroyed. So let's look at some hypothetical scenarios. Let's say that the food that you're eating comes from mostly processed foods where you have, which I'm not saying is the case, but you have some chips in there, you have your bread, you have your burger, whatever else it is, you have some fruit, it doesn't really matter. All right, and so in this scenario, you don't really have a lot of fiber in your diet, okay? And so a lot of these calories are going to be absorbed very, very quickly, and they're going to be utilized as energy. What happens then if you swap out, let's say you swap one of these things, and you replace it with the same amount of calories, but you replace that with something like vegetables, okay? Like let's have a broccoli in here. And now, so what happens is that you actually have between these calories coming in and these calories being burnt, which is in the system right here, you have some really interesting things that can happen. So you might actually have that the amount of energy required to digest this food, it might be higher, right? So if you were eating processed food, maybe the amount of energy that you have to burn that, which would be the thermic effect, is going to be higher. And what you can see here is that even if you didn't swap the calories coming in, but you just changed the food, you've still created, what do we call it? A calorie deficit. My spelling looks really bad on this. But it's not like a calorie has been destroyed in this system, it's just that it's been utilized in a different way. Maybe you've heard of someone talk about reverse dieting when they actually increased their calories and it meant that they lost weight. Well, one thing that could have happened in that scenario is that, let's say they increased their calories, they added in some potatoes in here, they're still eating whatever else they're eating, and then because they now have more energy, they actually move and exercise more, which can happen. And so now they have again created a small calorie deficit. And so you can see with this system here that while a calorie deficit is vital for fat loss, and the only thing that matters for fat loss, there are many, many things that can actually influence whether what you eat and what you burn together creates a calorie deficit. So to answer the hardest question, the most important question, which is how do I actually consistently get into a calorie deficit, you need to be asking the question, what are the things that are going to make it easiest for me to do that? And those things are going to be whole plant foods because they have less calories absorbed, which makes it easier to get into a calorie deficit, and they're naturally low in calories. That's the most important part. They're just simply lower in calories than their counterparts. But the other thing that I think is important to understand about how calories work is to see things on a longer timeline. So I'm going to show you something really quick. So let's say that you have your calorie input over the course of, say, a week. Let's say this is Monday, this is Tuesday, this is Wednesday, we've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, okay? And this is the amount of calories that you're eating. It's going to be 0 here, cal, 3,000. I know it's not to scale. In this scenario, this person is wanting to get into a calorie deficit, so they're choosing to eat low calorie throughout the week, all right? And so they're doing this every single week, or every single day leading up to the weekend. So their average calories at this point, their average calories for the week, because they've been consistent, we would say, okay, so the average right now is 1,500 calories, okay? So for most people, like that's going to get them into a weight loss zone. They're going to be losing weight. But then what happens is the weekend comes along. And this is why crash dieting, even if you think that you're working really hard or eating in a way where you're going to go and have a binge, is so detrimental. Because let's say that you now eat 3,000 calories on the weekend, and maybe Sunday you actually eat 5,000 calories, which is very, very easy to do, considering a takeout meal is like 2,000 calories. So now, even though you feel like it's been super difficult, and for the most part you have been eating 1,500 calories a day, because of how math works, your average is now up much, much, much higher. So in this scenario right here, had you been consistent, then your average calories would be 1,500 times 7, which means that you have 10,500 for the week, where you go 10,000 divided by 500, divided into 7, because it was 7 days, which we know the answer, because we already worked it out, is going to be 1,500 calories. So that is your daily average. But let's say you have those splurges, like what we looked at here. Now we go, well, your 1,500 calorie average is only for 5 days, okay? So we're at 700, we'll do 750 calories over those 5 days, but then we've got plus 3,000 for one of the days of the weekend, and then we've got another like 5,000 calorie day in there. So what does that work out to? Which equals 1,500 calories for the week divided by 7 equals 2,214 calories, and that is your daily average. And so what you can see in the scenario is that even though someone feels like they're working super hard, their actual average is probably not getting them into a deficit. And this is not just over the course of a week, and you can think about this over a much longer timeline, where you might be doing this cycle where you are in a calorie deficit, you are eating low calories for some days or some months, or even some years, but systemically over a long timeline, you're not in a calorie deficit, which is why you gain year on year, even if you're working really, really hard, because you have these big calorie gaining times because you're just eating excess calories and it's forcing your average up. And I never understood this, which is why when I did, I started to be a lot more moderate with the way that I was trying to lose weight, because I realized that if I could have a higher calorie average, because here's the thing, this person right here, how much better off, remember they were eating 2,200 calories a day as an average with that cycle, which is easy to do. If they had just tried to eat 1,800 calories a day, and like their meals looked more like this, which would be easier day to day, maybe they had like a little splurge on the weekend, maybe they had a little bit less one day, right? Now their average per day is 1,800. So they're going to be more likely, and that for them might be a lowering from their starting point. I'm going to tell you something that I believe to be true, and there's a certain level of irony in it because I am in the same space myself, and that is that when it comes to marketing, it is easier to market a fix or a rule-based system where don't eat calories after this point in the day, just don't eat these foods. That it's just simpler. It's simpler to understand that than it is to explain what I've just explained. And like, even if you're at this point in the video, like most people are checked out by now. So we are influenced by the fact that this is somewhat complicated compared to just don't eat carbohydrates. It is a marketing strategy, and it is just easy for the user to understand rules more than it is to understand concepts. But you have to understand this if you want long-term results, because you're just going to be asking different questions and it is going to change your behavior. Anyway, that was Maths with Charles. I hope that you found this helpful. Please let me know in the comments, did you learn anything from this? If so, great. If not, then that is also fine. And I'll just make another video. So I will see you next week for one of those. Okay, bye.